Relational Lives are back for 2026, and Ros and I today are going to be talking about sharing the load in 2026 in a relationship. We're going to be explaining what it is, what that means, how the dynamic shows up in a couple, what it feels like for each individual, and how you can change it. So whether you're the person that feels like you're carrying the load or the person who gets the nagging and the blaming and the criticism because you're not carrying the load, this is going to be really helpful for you. So do stay tuned. Please do subscribe and follow us, because it helps to get the word out there. I hope you enjoy this. Welcome back, Ros.
Welcome back, Ali. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Yeah.
So this is an exciting new season for us, isn't it? Because we're doing it slightly differently from our own therapy rooms.
Yes, we are.
Rather than in the studio. And so everybody's going to have to get used to us getting used to doing it ourselves, and also all the technical kind of things that come with that.
Yeah, we've just spent half an hour trying to sort that out and already done 2 recordings of this and messed up. So this is a third attempt.
Yeah, third time lucky. So the mental load, Ali, what do we mean by that?
We mean where one person in a relationship, in a couple dynamic, feels like they are carrying the load of responsibility and tasks, and thinking about tasks and thinking about the relationship and thinking about the things that need doing. And it feels a lot.
It can really feel a lot, can't it? And I think it's something that people who we see, our clients sometimes come in with as in their couple dynamic, that it can play out in that very strongly, can't it?
Definitely. And I think especially after period of like Christmas, any kind of holidays where there's hosting going on, families, friends getting together, it can feel even heavier, can't it?
I think it can, and explains why we perhaps get more couples inquiries following Christmas. I mean, I think there are a lot of dynamics that go on with Christmas, dealing with sort of blended families and in-laws and that sort of thing. But I think this carrying the mental load leading up to Christmas and then having Christmas and then that kind of feeling afterwards of exhaustion, having gone through so much, is very significant for people.
Yeah, I think that one of the highest times rates for people filing for divorce is January, February.
So not surprising really, and maybe this is a contributing factor.
Absolutely. So what we want to do here is help you, if you're sort of in a relationship like this, help you to understand what it is, what might be going on in the background for each of you, and how it can be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as you were saying, I think just a little bit more perhaps on understanding what it really means, this mental load. Like you say, it's carrying an awful lot, isn't it? All the information of things we have to do. But also, what that might look like in a couple. And often I think it's not necessarily fully seen, because so much can be what's going on in the head.
Exactly. It can be what's seen as well, can't it? It can be the chores and the looking after the children and the actual tasks. But yeah, a lot of it can be the thinking about what needs doing, and the one that's telling the other partner what needs doing and when and how.
As well as having to think through those things. So sometimes that thinking about can also be, should we do this? Should we do that? What is the best thing for this child? Sort of really kind of trying to go through all the issues that might arise that have to be perhaps thought about and then done.
Yeah. And when we see this in couples, I don't know about yours, but when couples come with this dynamic, often the person that feels like they're carrying the load of responsibility can become very burnt out, because they're taking on actually a lot of work, mental work and physical work and practical work, and there comes a time when that feels like I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it feels too much. And I think this is in all sorts of couples. I think stereotypically it has come from maybe the woman holding more, and I think that comes from bygone times, as it were, where there might have been much more of the stay-at-home mum. The husband would have gone out to work. But I think that we both see this plays out in every single kind of, or can do, every single kind of couple relationship, whether the same sex or not.
Yes.
That one person tends to be the one who carries this mental load.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what then happens, we see, is that the person that is carrying the load and taking the responsibility is that when they're trying to get help, it comes across in a very frustrated way, doesn't it? And it can come across as quite naggy. You know, you might have heard people say, "Oh, stop nagging." I don't like that word because it has very negative connotations to it, doesn't it?
It does. And it's really difficult, isn't it? Because nagging is there because somebody isn't necessarily feeling like they're supported, or
exactly
that load is shared in any way. So therefore they're getting to that point, like you say, of feeling more kind of frustrated. And also that is where it has built up to, isn't it? It's probably been over some time.
So that the nagger is actually, you know, trying to get help, is trying to elicit help to get their partner on that same team.
And it's really difficult, isn't it? Because as we know from what we know working with couples and looking at that negative cycle, which we've done in a previous episode, is that it's really difficult when the way that somebody is communicating is asking for something, but the way it comes across is in another way. So asking for that help, asking for that care and support, and yet the way it comes out is actually can often push the other away.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, people say to me, "I've tried all those ways. I've tried the softer way. I've tried the harder way. I've tried every way. It doesn't work." I think the problem can be that, well, there's something going on the other side, with the other partner too. But I think the problem can be that even if you ask softly and that frustration is in your body, it's going to come out, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that comes up. People often say it's sort of passive aggressive, don't they use that kind of terminology?
Yeah.
That it's there, you can still feel it. Somebody is still feeling as if they're being criticised or blamed in some form.
And this is why some forms of couple therapy don't work, because they might tell you how to say something. But even if you say it in that way, the rest of your body and your tone and your demeanour will be showing that frustration.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's not going to work.
No. Let's talk about the other side then, the partner who isn't carrying the load and what this is like for them in this dynamic.
So for them, again, in terms of the cycle, we can refer to this a little bit later, but seeing how that plays out in that negative cycle. But often I think somebody who is on the other side of the mental load carrier feel like they're not getting it right, that they're failing, that they're not good enough in some ways. And I think that inside that can feel really difficult. And so I think the reaction and response to those experiences can sometimes be being cross and trying to kind of close down that feeling, or withdrawal, or a mixture of them both.
Yeah. So that feeling of not being good enough, being inadequate, and leading to withdrawing from engaging in it at all, not even trying, or just getting angry and critical and harsh and blaming back.
Yeah, and that's sort of where, you know, stop nagging me, stop, you know.
Yeah. Calm down, love.
Yeah. That won't go down well.
No. Nobody has ever calmed down by being told to calm down.
No, absolutely. And I think also, I forgot what I was going to say. There's something I was going to say about that experience for that person it can shut down. Oh, yes. I was thinking that sometimes what they can say is, you know, you've given me 10 things to do. I've done the 9. And it's the 10th thing that you're then telling me that I'm not doing and criticising me for.
Right. It feels like it's never good enough. No matter what I do, it's never going to be good enough, because there's always going to be that little bit that I don't do right or haven't done. Yeah.
And in that, I think then reinforcing that, you know, I can't get anything right. I just can't win.
Yeah.
Not that it's about winning and losing, but I think it can feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're listening to this, you know, and I hope people do listen to this if they're on the side of the relationship who's not carrying the load. We want you to feel like you can make sense of this for you too. This isn't about someone being better than the other. It's about how this shows up in your dynamic between you. And for you, the one that's not carrying the load, we're saying this can feel like you're really inadequate, you're not good enough. You know, you might withdraw into that space of I'm not even going to bother trying. And that fuels this whole cycle between you.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. It's the cycle that's between them.
Yeah.
And that means that, you know, what we'll move on to in a bit is where perhaps this comes from to understand it more. But it's understanding that each person plays a part.
Yeah. And should we go on to that now? Because I guess we've sort of talked about the kind of vague, the general dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into a little bit more how this is a negative cycle where each person's actions feed the other person, and it's that infinity loop that just keeps getting stronger.
So perhaps we can do that. Perhaps we can just walk through the cycle. Do you want to just walk through what it might look like in terms of carrying the mental load? Okay.
So if we think about the negative cycle, and on the inside there are our own feelings and experiences and what we tell ourselves that's going on in the relationship.
So those are all the things that people can't see, aren't they?
Yeah, that the other partner might not know about. So the person that's carrying the load often feels quite alone, overwhelmed, angry, frustrated, sometimes hopeless if it's been going on a long time. Anything you'd add to that, Ros?
No, I mean, I'm just feeling into that. You know, it sort of feels really heavy, doesn't it? It's a really hard place to be, to sort of feel so alone, feeling like you're carrying everything and so longing in a way for something different, so wanting to be able to share it. I was just feeling into those words.
And perhaps telling themselves, my partner doesn't care. My partner doesn't care that this is too much for me. My partner doesn't care about me enough. So there's the feelings inside. There's what you tell yourself this means about you and the relationship. And then there's how you respond to those feelings and thoughts, which are often sort of pushing for more help, asking for more help, criticizing. Why haven't you done the dishwasher again? Why have you forgotten to unload it again? Why haven't you unloaded it again? Why have you loaded it wrong? I've told you the knives go in like that.
The dishwasher experience comes into our work yet again.
Yeah. If you've ever listened to any of our other ones about couples, you'll hear the dishwasher come up quite a bit. Dishwasher. It's a common one, though.
It is a common one, and it's a really good example because it can feel also like, in a way, that's like if you're not taking on the thing that I've said so many times, then of course it's going to feed the things that you've just spoken about of, well, you clearly don't care, you don't think I'm important, and where it can lead inside to feeling alone and overwhelmed and, yeah, sad, I think.
And then, of course, getting to that point where you think, well, I'm never going to get this help, so I'm just going to have to do it all on my own anyway. And I'll just keep taking it on and not expect anything, try not to expect anything, but of course you still want that.
Yeah, I think also it can be, it's just easier to do myself.
Yeah.
I think that can be some of the narrative that goes on.
And how about the other side? Do you want to...
Yep. So if we carry on, so, you know, the dishwasher is being filled in the way that, you know, has been asked not to be filled a million times. And then the way that you've just described that person saying, you know, you've not done it right again. I've asked you so many times. That inside, the inside part for the person who isn't carrying the mental load, that's where they can start feeling or thinking that they're not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm useless, I'm no good. And so that can then feel, in its own way, I think, very isolating within a relationship.
Yeah.
Like whatever I do, it's never enough.
Yeah. Very lonely.
Very lonely, very isolating. And then I think what can happen is that, as well as those thoughts, I'm not good enough, I can't get it right, that then what on the outside, what we might see is the things we described a little bit earlier, where anger can come up. It's like, for goodness sake, I've tried my best. It's like, I can't seem to get anything right. You've asked me to do 10 things. It's only one thing I forgot, or one thing I didn't get it done in the way that you wanted it done. So it can come out in that sort of way. Or I think it can be, I'm just going to shut up. And do less, actually. So it's like, well, why should I bother?
Well, the other way it can come out, I've just thought there was, they might say, well, if you tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, isn't it? Because it makes sense in one way. It's like, how am I going to know what to do unless you tell me? But even in that, it's asking the other person to hold the responsibility to think about what they want shared, rather than it being a shared thinking, a shared deciding.
Mm-hmm.
Or even the person who doesn't carry the mental load actually volunteering and saying, look, I'm going to do this. Might not be done in the way that you want it done, but I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And can you trust me to do it? Even if it's not done in the way that you want it done, can you trust that I will do it and it will get done?
Yeah. And I think that's really key, actually, in terms of when we look at both parts, both people in this, the person who is carrying the mental load, there is a part that can be really hard to let that go, to trust that it's going to be done in a way that you're going to feel okay with.
In the right way, in the right time frame, in the same order. If we think, the more you, the more I, that's the sort of cycle, isn't it? The more you withdraw from doing any of this, or the more you call me a nag, or the more you tell me, well, if you tell me, I'll do it, the more alone I feel with this, the more I feel like we're not a team, the more I have to carry. And then the more I nag you and criticize you and fight for this. And then the more you withdraw, pull away, or criticize me.
And that's that infinity loop, keeping on going and going and going and going.
For years, sometimes for years.
Really tough, isn't it?
Yeah. And can be so ingrained. And this is why we encourage couples to come to couples therapy sooner rather than later, because sometimes it's really, really hard to shift this cycle, isn't it, when it's been going on for years.
It is. And you can understand why, because if that has been going on for years and you've been trying so hard, you can feel, I think you used the terminology earlier, sort of burnt out. So from the side of the person who's carrying that mental load, feeling like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I can't think for everybody all the time anymore. Children maybe have left home at that stage, and then they're kind of left with the relationship. And I think that can be really hard when it feels like you haven't had actually on both sides your needs met.
Yeah.
Where you have felt criticised or where you have felt on your own for so long.
Yeah. And you really lose any kind of romantic, intimate spark, don't you, in that cycle?
I think sometimes it can feel for the person who's carrying the mental load that the relationship changes into a sort of parent-child type relationship rather than adult-adult relationship. Yeah. And I think that's what that can often be craved, is an adult-adult relationship.
Oh yeah, because it's not sexy, is it, to be parenting or to feel like a child in a relationship?
No, it's very hard to shift into that thinking process of re-meeting that adult part of the other person and rekindling that.
What we're going to do next is talk about where this might come from, why people fall into this particular dynamic so easily. And there are different aspects of it. So there are perhaps the way that you grew up and the role modelling that you had, the experiences of growing up and how that might have influenced, and neurodiversity maybe influencing, gender, like Ros mentioned earlier, and sometimes culture as well may influence, who we are before we even enter this relationship and how likely we are to be the one that picks up responsibility or be the one that relaxes back into someone else taking control.
Yeah, all of those are so important to consider, aren't they? Because I'm just thinking of the culture one, for instance. It's the culture that you've been brought up in terms of your family culture. And like you say, those early experiences of what has been modelled. Mm-hmm. So what you have learned, what the sort of roles that you have watched, whether that be your caregivers, your parents, for instance, what that dynamic has been, and therefore what you've kind of taken in as what your role is.
Yes.
And also culturally, in terms of the wider culture and what can be expected in different types of cultural upbringings.
Yes, between genders as well.
Between genders as well, yeah. So I think that can certainly have an impact. And like you say, neurodiversity as well. It can be really difficult for people who, for instance, might have ADHD to hold on to certain tasks that need to be done.
Yeah.
Particularly if they might be really boring tasks.
Which most chores are. Especially the dishwasher.
So I think that all of those things can be impactful, can't they?
Yeah. So going back to more around the ADHD, often people that have an ADHD brain struggle to prioritize tasks as well, don't they? It's, you can have all these million things running around in your brain, but you find it really hard to prioritize, whereas somebody neurotypical will find that easier. So the other partner may be able to prioritize and, okay, this needs doing first because this is happening first. And the ADHD partner cannot do that. So we'll need some support around that.
And I think what's difficult is that sometimes even if there is an awareness within the couple that ADHD is there, sometimes there isn't that awareness.
Yes.
And that can be frustrating as well for both parties. But it's really difficult, I think, sometimes for the person who doesn't have ADHD to understand why that simple thing couldn't be done.
Absolutely
to
it
them.
is.
A simple thing to them couldn't be done.
I've told you so many times. Why haven't you done it? Because it's gone in the brain, but something else comes in and takes over, and then that gets their attention.
Even the strategies that the person might use who's carrying the mental load themselves, like list making and all those sorts of ways of trying to hold on to everything they might be holding and carrying, that's not necessarily the way that it will work for somebody with a neurodiversity.
We've got a good book recommendation for ADHD couples. We'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, so early experiences can be relevant. Sometimes it might be that you've had a really chaotic upbringing, so it's felt very out of control. And as an adult, you really want control. And so you take responsibility and you need control and you need to plan and you need order to feel safe in your body. And that can come across as taking on all that responsibility, can't it?
And you can understand why.
You can.
It sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And I think this is really important, is when we start looking underneath at where some of this comes from and those early experiences and how we've interpreted our worlds and the way we then talk to ourselves about who we are in the world and what we need. Of course, that makes sense why we then go towards, perhaps, like you say, either carrying the mental load or alternatively not.
Or not, yeah. So the experience of someone who is quite content to, not carry that load, not take all that responsibility, and sometimes appears very laid back, can be that growing up, they had a very different experience, that they had their parents do a lot for them, keep them safe, do the planning, do the organising. They didn't have to take on responsibility or think about things so much.
Yeah. Or alternatively, they might have felt like they had to try and succeed in everything. And so working really hard at a different way of succeeding, maybe in work or in academia or in whatever form that takes.
Good point, yeah.
And actually how that then can come out when they're failing in this dynamic, if you like, within the relationship, can feel crippling. And paralyzing. And so I think that can also lead to a place, well, God, it feels in the body, there is anxiety, in fact. There is an anxiety of, I have to try and get this right. I have to try and get this right. And then each time not getting it right and then feeling the failing again and then maybe giving up.
Really good point. Yeah. Yeah. I have to get this, I have to achieve this really well. And actually I'm looking at my partner who's bloody brilliant at this. And I can't get anywhere near that.
Yeah. And also the speed, I think. Sometimes the speed at which the person who is carrying the mental load works, the speed that their mind works to think of all those things.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that can come up where the partner who isn't carrying the mental load can say, well, you're already 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
How can I possibly keep up?
Mm-hmm.
And then that reinforces that I'm failing again.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it, when you kind of immerse yourself in each person's experience and understand the why, this where this can come from. And I think that when couples get together, you know, this information is so important, because if you can catch it early, if you know it and you can catch it early, you can do something differently quite quickly before it takes hold and creates this groove that's hard to get out of.
Absolutely. And I think certain events in life can change that. I think sometimes pre-children, for instance, things can feel more even.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes once a child comes into the mix, it can completely change that dynamic. And you didn't necessarily expect it to be that way, which can be hard. So I think life events can change that as well.
Yeah. Often people say, oh, it was fine before we had children.
Yeah.
Because there's not so much responsibility, there's not so much to think about then, is there?
So completely understandable. And I think this making sense thing is so important, what you're saying. Because with what we're hoping to do today, you know, understanding what this mental load is and how it shows up and then where it comes from, when we make sense of things and each person can hear that. So in our couples therapy work, that's really important, isn't it? When so much more can be seen and understood by each other.
Yes.
That it brings in so much more possibility of compassion and understanding. And change can then potentially come from that.
Yeah, and that's really key, that we always start with try to get an understanding of this cycle first and be patient. Nothing's going to change straight away, and it won't change until you both have an awareness of what's going on between you and you can understand this cycle and where it comes from in each other. So if you're listening to this, you know, maybe share it with your partner. And you can talk about it from there, like what's this between us and where might this come from for each of us? And then from there, you can sort of talk about how you can do it differently, which we will speak about in a minute.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is really important, because one of the things that we tend to ask in our work, isn't it? It's not what is perhaps seen explicitly on the outside of this cycle, but it's like when we talk about the dishwasher, how does that conversation go between us? And then it can be on the inside, I'm feeling and I'm telling myself this, and I know then I do this on the outside.
Yes.
And each partner doing that, so that when you said about slowing it down and being patient, I think when we do that in that way, rather than getting caught up, well, I told you, you know, no, I put the knives in this way and I did, rather than getting caught up in that argument, by understanding how the argument goes can then lead to so much more understanding.
And then you feel less alone in that, don't you? Like if you're both understanding each other and sharing this, even then you can feel less alone.
Which is amazing, isn't it, really, if you think about it?
Yeah.
When somebody can have felt, you know, both parties in their own way alone for so long.
And then from that place, you can discuss how can we do this differently, given who we are, where we've come from, how we're wired, how can we do this differently? So I don't feel so alone carrying this all, and you don't feel so inadequate and incapable within this.
Just noticing how you're saying that, those words, to how it felt when you were describing, or when we were describing what it feels like for the partners when they're caught up in this cycle. It feels so different, doesn't it? It's like I feel it in my body right now, that hearing those words of being together and working through this together and sharing it, even if it's difficult to come up with so-called solutions, just having that understanding feels like we're working together. And that is so comforting, isn't it?
Because we're approaching this problem together.
And we can take time to figure it out. It might not be figured out straight away. And I might get caught up still in that same pattern because I've been doing it for an awfully long time. So, there's going to have to be some understanding that how do we catch it? How do we stop ourselves before it goes back into that same pattern?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's what we would leave you with, isn't it? It's that for you as a couple and as individuals to listening to this podcast, start to explore what this is between you, how this shows up between you as a couple, and what is it you tell yourself within. Are you saying I'm alone? Are you saying my partner doesn't care? Are you saying I'm not good enough? Are you telling yourself you're not capable? Just check in your inside experience, but also how this shows up between you and how you react on the outside, the behaviours you do within that.
I always think if we simplify it in that way, what's going on in the inside and what's going on in the outside, and being able to just catch it, to notice to start with, because we invariably do feel something in our bodies. We do feel a sort of alarm going off, an uh-oh type thing, don't we? When there's going to be a cycle about to take off, or when the cycle started. And so I think that's a really helpful thing if we slow down and ask ourselves those questions. And it might be that each person is doing that separately for a little bit.
Yes.
In order to be able to kind of say, I think I'm being activated. I think we need just to have a little bit of time out. Can we come back? Can we come back and just kind of work through what went on between us? Because this is a really common pattern. And I want to really understand myself, and I really want to understand you. Yeah.
And then when you two have got a bit of a sense of this, sometimes people give their cycle a name, don't they? Which can be quite helpful, because you can then just call it out. Oh, we're in the black hole cycle, or we're in the spiral, whatever you want to call it. And from there, like we said before, you can get together as a team and say, how can we do this differently? Given each of you how you're wired, what you know about yourselves, what is going to work better? We can't tell you that.
No, we can't give the answers to those sort of solutions, isn't it? It's like that's a solution to the thing, rather than actually understanding why the thing happens in the first place.
Believe me, we would absolutely love to be able to say, do this, step 1, 2 and 3, and it will all be okay. But it doesn't work like that. It might work short term, but certainly not long term.
And I think it's also understanding that each party, each person might have to challenge themselves to do something different. Because if we understand ourselves and where this comes from and why we do it, and if we're then able to catch ourselves more, there may be, for instance, I'm thinking about carrying the mental load person, is where are the expectations in there? How high are the expectations? What would it be like to lower those in some ways? What would that look like? What would that mean? So I think there are sort of questions we can ask, which can sort of then lead to the place where actually, let's figure this out together. Let's say the dishwasher thing comes in as the thing that they're going to try it with. How would it be we take it in turns? Or how would it be that there are so many different options.
Yes.
How would it be that, we do it together and I do cutlery and you do plates? Whatever. It's like there is a way that they will be able to, we can come up with solutions, but it's about the point of doing it together.
Yeah. Yeah. That was such a good point there, about challenging yourself, asking yourself those questions. And that's a really good one. I was thinking about, my relationship with my ex-husband and how I did take on that load, very much so. And I was the one that wouldn't, it had to be a certain way or a certain time, because otherwise I would feel really anxious. It's not going to get done. And if it doesn't get done, then I've got to do even more the next day. And thinking back, I think I could have, perhaps lowered my expectations and pulled back on that and trusted that even if those sandwiches for the kids got made at 6 o'clock in the morning rather than 8 o'clock the previous night, that they would get done. And that's hard. That is hard.
I was going to say, what do you think that would have been like for you to do that?
I would have felt anxious. I would have felt stressed. But then perhaps long term, there would have been a different outcome.
And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because there can be anxiety in both parties. In both partners, there can be an anxiety inside, anxiety to try and get it right and feeling like you're failing, and anxiety in what happens if those things don't get done.
Yeah.
And it's how do we understand ourselves and understand when we feel anxious and how we ride through that. That we don't just go and do the thing that kind of temporarily removes the feeling of anxiety for a short while, but actually we can sit with it, we can understand, we can be more compassionate to ourselves, knowing this is really difficult, but really wanting to do something different, to really challenge ourselves, to change a possible pattern of a lifetime or a possible belief of a lifetime. Certainly make dents into it. Yeah.
So here's your goal for 2026. You couples out there going through this is to, by the end of 2026, this has got to look different. This is going to change. If you think about this, you approach it together, it can be very different.
And I think it's a really lovely commitment actually to a new year.
Yeah.
It's an investment, isn't it, in a relationship where you're investing in breaking patterns.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've pretty much covered everything about carrying the load, sharing the load.
Yes, that's a nice way of moving it, isn't it? From carrying to sharing.
Yeah.
And I think, anybody who wants to comment on, their experiences in their relationships, please do. We love to hear from you all.
Yeah. And do subscribe, like and share. As we've said before, share it with your partner if you're the one listening to this, because then it will, you'll both be in the same place to talk about it from.
Yeah, absolutely. And follow us. The more people that subscribe and follow, it's great because we can get this message out to everybody and hopefully pass on some help.
Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Ali.
Bye, Ros.